What about an autocracy? What would be the distinction between that and an
Right. So typically, an
autocracy?
authoritarian or an autocrat or a tyrant would be somebody who seizes power
Or
and
just a
doesn't try to
king?
claim legitimacy.
Or just a king?
They often end up becoming kings. That's correct.
Yeah, well
Genghis
then
Khan is a
yeah,
perfect example.
yeah, you could have a Christian nationalism which a king was acceptable, sure.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So glad you decided to pull up a chair for this one. In today's clip, we've got Andrew Wilson, who openly defends Christian nationalism, sitting across from Dr. Kurt, an atheist who is not interested in letting anything slide by undefined. What starts as a calm argument over whether Christian nationalism is just normal politics slowly turns into Kurt asking simple, direct questions and Andrew answering them in ways that get more and more revealing. By the time they're talking about kings, one-man rule, and what the country's official identity should be, you can feel the whole thing tilt. Stick with me all the way through, because the payoff at the tail end is the part that really makes this worth your time, and you do not want to miss how it lands. Before we jump in, drop a quick note in the comments and let me know what part of the world you're tuning in from. I genuinely love seeing how far this community reaches. Alright, let's get into it and break down exactly where this conversation goes off the rails.
Okay, so that doesn't sound to me like Christian nationalism. That sounds like just general politics, which, politics has always involved voting blocks of like-minded people voting together
Well, there's
to
many
push
different
their interests, right?
flavors.
But
Well, no, there's
repealing the
many
19th
different
Amendment
flavors
would
of
be very different.
democracy. Do you
Repealing the
agree?
19th
No,
Amendment would be
no.
required three-quarters of the states.
Do you agree that Canada and the UK share a voting system and that it's very different from how the voting system works in the
Yeah, they
United
have
States?
parliamentary system.
Yeah, but do you agree with me that both of these are democracies?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Then when you say that's not what Christian nationalism is, I say it is what Christian national. Yes, it is. You're just saying that there's a form of Christian nationalism you think it's not, and it's like,
I
no,
mean,
not
there's
really.
definitions for Christian
What the
nationalism.
major advocation here is you're not debating them, you're debating me. And I
Okay,
told
but
you what it is that I advocate for. And what I advocate for is utilizing the systems of direct democracy to put Christians in charge to end the system of direct democracy because it's stupid.
okay,
It's
but
a
there's a
stupid system.
specific, like, scholarly accepted definition of Christian nationalism.
That's an appeal to authority. It's a fallacy. You're
Okay,
not
no,
debating them. You're
no,
debating me.
that's not a fallacy because I'm not making a deductive
Do I
argument. I'm just making a
recognize I
claim.
don't yeah, okay. Did I give you what I define Christian nationalism as? Yes, I did. You're not
Sure.
debating with scholars, you're debating with Andrew Wilson.
So, Andrew, just to be clear, you are
Mhm.
against authoritarianism. You are against ethnic purity. You are against the embrace of the idea that the elites are against the
Hang on a
public.
second. You're kind of now you're loading a bunch of stuff onto my
Well, those are the
position that I didn't
scholarly
say.
definitions, and you're telling me you don't
Those are
agree with the
definitions
scholarly
that
definition.
you have decided upon from who?
From what academics who study this
Which
topic say.
academic?
Right, but I'm trying to say, so your Christian nationalism is not what they say Christian nationalism is.
Well, you haven't told me which scholar's saying this, why he's
Well,
saying it, and how we
there
determined that that's
there's the
actually
Kettering
what king is.
criteria, which are an embrace of capitalism, hypercapitalism,
According to
authoritarianism.
who?
What?
According to who? You?
According to the definitions given by people in the scholarly literature.
Who?
I just told you, the Kettering Foundation.
The Kettering Foundation.
Yeah.
Now, this
It's
Kettering
mainly
Foundation's
based on Whitehead and Perry's work, but let me be clear.
okay.
I
All right, hang on. Let's back up. I just wanna make sure I get this right. What makes the Kettering Foundation an authority on the advocacy of modern Christian nationalism?
Nothing makes them authorities on it.
Exactly. They're not authoritative.
If you're saying your definition is a bespoke definition that doesn't have truck with the standard definition, that's fine. You can define
There
it
is no
first.
standard definition.
Okay, stop. Right here is where the mask slips, and I need you to sit with it. Andrew Wilson is not hiding the ball at all. He flat out says what he wants is to use the systems of direct democracy to put Christians in charge to end the system of direct democracy because it's stupid. Read that twice. He wants to use democracy to kill democracy. Voting only matters to him until it hands him the result he's after, and then the latter gets kicked away. That isn't me twisting his words, that is his position in his own mouth. And here's what people miss, the second doctor. Kurt tries to anchor any of this to how scholars actually define Christian nationalism. Andrew throws up a shield. Andrew said this, that's an appeal to authority, it's a fallacy. No. Citing researchers who study a subject is not a logical fallacy, it is how every field of knowledge functions. You don't get to wave away history or political science by shouting fallacy every time an expert is mentioned. That's not beating a debate, that's refusing to have one. Then he doubles down. Andrew said this, "You're not debating with scholars, you're debating with Andrew Wilson." Slick line, but it tells you everything. He wants to be judged only by his own private rule book, where he can redefine any word the instant it gets inconvenient. And when Kurt just asks him to point to the agreed definition, Andrew says there is no standard definition. Watch how fast those goalposts slide. That is the tell.
Okay, there is a standard definition
No,
in
there's not.
scholarly literature. There
No, there
absolutely
isn't.
is.
There is not. Show it to me then.
Sure,
Show me
I
the
just gave it
standards.
to you.
No, you show me which scholars agree that this is the case.
I said Whitehead and Perry.
Yeah, which other scholars? You said it's universal among scholars they agree. Who? Who agrees with them?
I don't know.
You don't know.
What scholars agree with your position?
You don't know. I'm not making an appeal to them. You are.
Okay, I'm not making an appeal to them. I'm trying to find out your fucking definition, dude.
I told you already, and I explained
Okay,
in
so
depth.
I want to clarify what it excludes from the standard definition so I can deal with it.
That's not the standard definition.
It is the standard definition.
No, it's not. It's just a
I
definition
encourage
you
anybody to look
decided
it
that you're
up.
going to appeal
But-
to.
Are you saying you are your version of Christian nationalism is not authoritarian? Is that correct?
No, it's gonna. There's versions of authoritarianism which would be involved in it, just like there's versions
So
of
do you accept
Hang on,
authoritarianism?
hang
as part
on.
of your Christian
Calm
nationalism?
down. Let's make sure that we get this right. Do you think that representative republics use authoritarianism or not?
No, representative republics are by definition.
Okay,
not
well, then what
authoritarian
is-
in that
then-
there's no single man rule and there are checks and balances.
So all you mean by authoritarianism is that one guy rules everything?
Yeah, I mean strongman rule. Yeah, a
Mhm.
caudillo.
Yeah, I'm not adverse to there being one person who's in charge. That could
Your
be
Christian
possible under a
nationalism is
model.
okay with authoritarianism.
Well, if you're defining it as just one guy who's in charge, right? Then yes, there can be a case that can be made that would be fine.
Great.
Sure.
Okay, so that's part of your definition as well as the authoritarianism.
No. Can be. It can be
okay.
acceptable. Not
In other
that-
words, you
that it
don't
is.
rule out authoritarianism. Most Americans
if you're
do.
if you're defining authoritarianism as just a
Let's
single
just use
guy.
the word a tyrant.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what would be the difference between an authoritarian and a king?
Not much.
So
The difference would
okay.
be that a king would supposedly come from a royal family and have a bloodline.
Well, they don't have to.
and
right?
establish a
Washington could have been a king, and he wouldn't have come from
Yeah,
any of
but
that.
he would, again, if he had become a king, he would have been established as a divine right, just like the Chinese established their dynasty.
Okay, so there's no
mandated heaven.
difference there.
Now this is the part that gets me because Kurt does something quietly brilliant. No insults, no trick traps. He just asks it plainly. Dr. Kurt asked him, "Are you saying your version of Christian nationalism is not authoritarian?" A clean yes or no question any normal person answers in 2 seconds. And Andrew can't say no. He will not say no. Instead, Andrew said this, "I'm not adverse to there being one person who's in charge. That could be okay with authoritarianism. Let that land." He is openly comfortable with one man holding all the power, as long as it's team gripping it. And when Kurt sharpens the point and says, "Dr. Kurt said, you don't rule out authoritarianism," Andrew doesn't fight it. He lets it sit there. Here's the educational piece, and it matters. The Roman Republic lasted nearly 5 centuries on one core idea, that no single man should ever hold total power. Then a run of strongmen decided checks and balances were inconvenient, and the whole thing collapsed into rule by emperors who claimed their authority was practically handed down from the heavens. Once you accept that one man can run everything if he's the right man, you've already surrendered the only thing protecting you from the wrong one. So when Kurt asks the difference between an authoritarian and a king, and Andrew just shrugs and says it's not much, understand that's not a tiny slip. That's him admitting the brakes were never even installed.
What about an autocracy? What would be the distinction between that and
Right.
an
So
autocracy?
typically an authoritarian or an autocrat or a tyrant would be somebody who seizes power
Or
and
just a
doesn't try to
king?
claim legitimacy.
Or just a king?
They often end up becoming kings. That's correct.
Yeah, well then,
Khan is
yeah,
a perfect example.
then yeah, you could have a Christian nationalism, which a king was acceptable, sure.
Okay, so you're okay with authoritarianism. How about a belief that the elites are acting against the public interest?
Some elites are, yes.
Okay, so you agree with that one. Then how about hypercapitalism?
Well, I agree with which one?
Hypercapital, like being
No, back
obsessed
up, back up to the
with
elites.
capital economics.
Yeah, back up to the elites.
So there's a general belief among Christian nationalisms that the elites are against the public and that they're selling the public out.
So there's a belief of almost everybody that that's the case.
Okay, but again, I'm just trying to see where you interact with the standard definitions.
Yeah, I
I am
think
not
that some.
making
Yeah,
a value judgment there.
I think some elites do. Sure.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
So, and then how about in terms of capitalist economics? Do you like strongly support capitalist economics?
I do.
Okay. And then do you emphasize religious identification with the country?
Like this is a Christian country.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would prefer that. Sure.
Okay. And then do you recommend ideological and ethnic purity?
When you say purity, what does that mean in this
That means
context?
you don't want immigration, you don't want dilution from people from other lands and other language communities.
I'm fine with limited immigration.
Okay, so honestly, the definition that the scholars give is not too far from your definition.
And there it is. The moment Andrew Wilson says a Christian nationalism where a king was acceptable, sure, the whole conversation changes, and I need you to understand why this is so wild. He opened this clip insisting it's all just normal politics, just people voting their values. Now he's calmly telling you a king would be fine, not as a joke, as a real option on the table. That is the distance he traveled in a handful of minutes, and Kurt barely had to nudge him, and he keeps rolling. When Kurt asks whether the country itself should be stamped as a Christian nation, Andrew said this, yeah, I would prefer that, sure. Then on the border, Andrew said this, I'm fine with limited immigration. So picture the full shape of what he's sketching. One man potentially at the top, the state branded with one official religion, the doors mostly shut. You don't have to be an atheist to find that unsettling, but as someone who values a secular government, this is exactly the future I do not want. Because a country built around a single faith never stays comfortable for the people who don't share it. And here's what makes the ending so satisfying. After all the dodging, all the yelling about fallacies and no standard definition, Kurt just calmly closes it, Doctor. Kurt said the definition that the scholars give is not too far from your definition. Done. The same man who spent the entire segment insisting nobody could pin down his beliefs got walked, one honest step at a time, into admitting he is the thing the experts described. He defined himself, and that's the real lesson. When someone rejects every definition, demands you only judge them by their own private terms, and gets heated the second you bring in outside knowledge, it's usually because they already know how it sounds out loud. The honesty only leaked out once he couldn't wiggle anymore. That is why this clip matters. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.